6 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and kick off the work session. We've got one item on the agenda, and that is a report on the Citizen Budget Forum. And we've got, our friend Ben Hart of Allen Gibson Halleck, here present. So we'll begin with Laura Gorley. Good evening, Laura.
Good evening. So, as you know, priority-based budgeting is a form of continuous process improvement. And this year, well, there's the evaluation and monitoring and adjusting phase. So this year, in a form of process improvement, we put the citizen input on the 2016 priorities right at the front of the process to help get their input on what the 2016 priorities should be. And as noted in the city newsletter and on our email blast and on the city's Facebook page, we kicked off that 2016 budget process on January 22nd with the Citizens Input Forum. And Ben Hart is here. He was one of the facilitators for that session, so he's here tonight to report back to the governing body.
Thank you, Laura.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Ben.
Members of the City Council. I was very happy to be invited to help Laura and Cheryl put together that community citizen engagement forum. Tonight, I don't have a PowerPoint for you because everything's in the packet and it was published online. Nothing new is going to come out here. That's not our job tonight. The work that was performed on the 22nd is that entirely of the citizens. And what you asked them to put together, they actually gave you. But what we'll do is walk through some of that feedback. And you've got two items, I believe, in your packet. One of them's the actual curriculum that was given out that includes not just your goals, but the initiatives as well. And then the next one is our report, just a summary, essentially just a summary of what was gathered, documentation of some of the conversation that took place. But before I walk you through that, I would kind of like to step back a little bit, even before that, the 22nd, and kind of draw some connections to what I know you as a governing body are working on now. This process has been going on for a while. It's actually part of your process, part of the continuous improvement process that we call budgeting for results, or priority-based budgeting. Each step you make an improvement in that process. We've talked to entities and we've coached entities through this all over the country that are 20 years into the process, and they still improve it. In fact, some of them haven't gotten as far as you guys have when it comes to citizen input and actually getting the feedback. They still struggle with that. We had 21 residents show up to not just go through the PowerPoint, but the prioritization as well. Not all 21 of them, but we still had enough there to give you guys good, solid feedback as you plan your process. So with that being said, back in December, I observed a retreat. If you remember, I was there. I watched John Nalbandian, who is a fantastic individual, to go through talking about roles of not just professional staff within municipalities, but also governing bodies. A couple of the things that I took out of that you guys had talked about are your roles. Very much similar to a budget process. Your roles as the directive capacity. You set the direction for staff to follow when it comes to providing goals and then deciding on initiatives. But one of the most critical pieces of that decision comes from stakeholder input. Part of your process, stakeholder input, which isn't new to this body because it's been doing it for quite a while. This forum was a new forum type that obviously you asked that same question. The other thing you recognized was the professionalism in staff is required in order to give you the techniques, the efficiencies, the linkages to the goals you would like to see take place. That professional staff needs to come back with those ideas, those linkages to those efficiencies and those results you would like to get to. And that menu of choices obviously boils down into one of the biggest decisions you make every year, into a policy statement and a resource allocation process. With that, there were also two characteristics I was really glad to hear you guys brought up, and effectively becoming effective at consensus building within the consensus building within yourselves of difficult issues. being able to have some of that tougher conversation. What does the future look like? How do we invest for the future? Not just plan for the past, but how do we invest our dollars going forward? And then second, how do you build trust within and outside the jurisdiction itself? Partnering with school districts, partnering with the metro area, bringing entities down that see the competitive proposals on economic development time and time again. But you guys took a step back and said, let's start with the citizen, like Laura said, let's start with the citizens and let's hear their input. We've got goals, we know what the higher 50,000 foot view needs to look like. Let's ask them for their input, and that's what you've got. One of the things we explained that evening, which you guys are also well aware of, is the concept of budget is not just programs, but it's also capital. And you can't have one without the other. In fact, capital is the foundation for providing those programs. And they're both a priority to move forward and monitor itself. Capital maybe being even a little tougher because of the nature of the beast. You've got 18-month building cycles sometimes. The engineering behind it can be complicated. The studies are costly. And sometimes it's just, even for me, it's tough to understand just exactly what go into some of the more complicated projects, like a wastewater treatment plant or a water treatment facility. Some enormous capital dollars flowing through the city itself. Programs might be a little bit easier, but maybe not on a political scale. I know I have an affinity for certain programs, my neighbor may not. But at the end of the day, we both have a say as to what we can afford, but how we move forward in deciding that process. And that's what you guys did, open that up. Capital planning includes buildings, infrastructure, technology, and major capital equipment. Even online, I can see that you guys have a draft form of 2015 to 2019 capital with detailed project sheets. Most entities don't put detailed project sheets together. That's a great tool because it becomes more transparent, more clear when it comes to what projects we're really talking about. And we're standing here in February, obviously because of state law, you've got August as a deadline. One of the opportunities we have obviously is to take that capital project, continue building on it, put 2020 in there, and move forward with the process, the transparency process. I know you've also got a sessions coming up, I believe February 23rd, to talk about CIP, unless that's changed. Let's see, what else did I forget? Nothing else, I don't think. There isn't anything else in here. Staff implemented the priority-based budgeting, like I said, back in 2014 budget. It's incorporated as part of your process. It's incorporated as part of the description within the book itself. Just as a reminder, obviously you guys know better than I do the 4 goals that we discussed January 22nd, promoting economic development, improving quality of life, maintaining infrastructure and asset management, and then fiscal stewardship. Those 4 were what we went through on the 22nd. Cheryl was able to give us a snapshot of what initiatives have been decided upon in 14 and 15. And as part of the process progresses in 16, obviously you're going to want to know what some of the statuses are, say on 14 and 15, as some of those projects may come to fruition later and maybe sooner. You're going to want that status, and that's part of your cycle, is that monitoring process show. With that, the community forum was broken down into 3 basic sections, and the report is as well. We went through the goals, a little bit of background on what municipal budgeting is as one section. We opened it up for question, and also in our report is the discussion that took place prior to the brainstorming of those goals. We provided it in here, maybe not verbatim like a city clerk might, but we had an individual over taking notes here that so spoke coming off the computer because of the number of comments that were coming out. Great discussion, but we wanted to document really the theme or what was being said. Tonight, we're not going to go through that discussion. We did document it. It is on the website, and there's continued conversations that will take place. What we're doing tonight is really going through that input we did receive. And with that, what I'd like to do is direct you over to the report that starts, City of Gardner at the very top, Citizen Budget Forum. What we did was divide the room into 3 or 4 tables, and had them come up with initiatives that they would like to see, that they would actually prefer, if you will, on an individual basis. We had scribes at each one of those tables to write those initiatives down. After which, we had a gentleman from my office, Derek Nielsen, that had got up and we recorded all of them, and it was also within the report, you can see a picture, thank goodness for technology, you can see a picture of each one of those listings. Those are the very listings he wrote out, from those tables, to try to capture everything that was being said, as far as the initiatives are concerned. Just starting from the top, we went through, promoting economic development. And if you look, stand back and look at all 4 of the council strategic goals, this one was one, I would say, that came out as the highest ranking. If you had to rank goals, you see a lot of votes. The individuals, arbitrarily, they had 5 dots they could put anywhere on the goals of the 4 goals themselves. So they could load them all up in economic development, they could load them up into fiscal stewardship. And it took a while when we came down to really thinking about what each one of those goals were. And you go sheet to sheet, looking at them. 2 of them surfaced on promote economic development. One was the commercial development right off the highway, leveraging those assets you already have, entry and exit off of highways. The, for example, that was brought up was warehouses. Obviously, there's multiple opportunities when it comes to ingress and egress out of the city on a major highway. Second one that came up with 7 votes were business development options. Again, tapping into something as an asset you have is that intermodal. How do you leverage that as a community? Well, not an enormous amount of discussion went behind defining exactly what that looks like. I guess it was identified as a major asset that the city has that needs to be part of our future. As you can see on that page, there's several other ones that surfaced. On the business development options to tap into intermodal, there were a number of conversations that took place as to what types. But at the very end of the day, it was the actual, what was actually voted on was that big goal, the business development options itself. Having those options, figuring out what those look like. That was promoting economic development. Improving quality of life. We've seen this one quite a bit. 5 votes came into full service community center, a need for a full service community center that can also serve as a meeting space. With 2 votes that came in for more intercurrent connectivity, trails, sidewalks, and paths. The paths, some of that relating to what was brought up was the connection between Celebration Park and Madison Elementary. And I believe that's Waverly Road to the north. Is the second way, obviously, to get there. There wasn't really a delineation, I don't think, as to which one it was. It's just that connection between the two locations itself. So that could almost be put in a category, both of those could be put in a category of healthy lifestyles, if you will, but improving the quality of life. Infrastructure and asset management was pretty even when it comes to the different goals that were in there, quite a few of them. Sewer upgrades and maintenance. I know the sewer and upgrades conversation took place with capacity in mind. As you go after a business, you want to be prepared to be able to serve those businesses going forward, so that planning is critical. And then something that, as the 15 years I've spent in government, has always been a battle, really studying the sewer and water system losses, I&I. Because those are where you're going to pay the most without getting any revenue return. It's always been a problem that needs to have a priority. And then training and equipment for the police department that continue maintenance, if you will, to make them effective out in the field. And then a good one nowadays, Google Fiber. But then if you step back from the actual name Google, really talking about high-speed internet. Again, another infrastructure item, when it comes into attracting commercial development. It's a recognition that it's needed out there. And then streetlights were, in the neighborhoods, were an issue. And LED streetlights actually came up in this one as well. Fiscal stewardship was the last one. Another venue for citizens to have a conversation about how money is spent with more lead time on budget-related issues. And this was related to, I guess, documents being posted sooner. And I know I've heard, not this council, but some councils outside of Gardner even say that, you know, some of these projects are so complex, they'd like to have information, they'd like to know ahead of time when something's coming down the pipe. So those governing bodies could even take a look at it. With as much data that you guys have coming to you, I know that you probably understand that. The second one with 4 votes, again, was process in place for ROI, return on investment for citizens, which I thought this one was a pretty good one as well. They want to track to see if it is working or not. This speaks into results-oriented budgeting. That's exactly what this does. When you allocate your dollars, how do you know they're working for you? Why did you put it there? And then a year from now, what did I get out of it? That's exactly what this speaks into. ROI. Cities aren't here, I'm preaching to the choir, but municipalities aren't here to make money. Your ROI is a community return, unless you're in a water or sewer business, then you are in a competitive environment with other privately owned utilities. But even then, you've got the ratepayer to make sure they've got their, you're covering them as well, that they're not getting costed out of the system. This one was a good one. Speaks right into what you're doing right now. And then applying for more grants, opportunities for cost sharing amongst those jurisdictions as you found you needed to increase that trust, increase that exposure from. How do you cost share? Which is becoming more and more of a trend. And the last one is after tonight, you won't see me except for an audit capacity. No more consultants. And this is maybe 2 sides to this. I liked seeing this because what also came up was investing in staff, whether it's the finance department, the police department, it doesn't matter. Investing in staff and giving them the trust to move forward with projects, maybe even future facilitation, having the police department working on projects that maybe they're not working on now, but with a little bit of training, you can move the needle on certain issues or certain goals or initiatives you have. And that's fantastic. That's efficiency. That's leveraging the dollars you have and the professional staff you have as well, and making them, their knowledge, work on your behalf. And that was good that was acknowledged as well in that meeting. We had previously had on here, we've scheduled budget policy guidance we wanted to get from you guys, but the more we talked about that, the more Cheryl, Laura, and I really thought this was an opportunity to kind of get the feedback from and the input from the citizens from January 22nd, be able to ask questions and work through what does this mean to you guys? When you see the list, when you guys see the list, I guess the question I would have is it what you expected to see? Is there anything there that either surprises you or makes you think, never thought about that? Because a lot of times the input sessions will come up with items that maybe weren't a priority before, but you kind of got a second thought at it. And maybe that's more of a rhetorical question for you guys as you move forward in this process. I know you got several plans coming at you, facility capacity study, you've got the capital management, pavement management plan that just got posted and introduced, multiple avenues that are you're absorbing a lot of information in a very short period of time. Hopefully what this did was focus down what some of those initiatives look like when it comes to your goals. With that, I would open it up to any questions. I wanted to leave plenty of time to discuss what you had on your minds when you went through this as well. I'm not sure if I missed anything, Cheryl or Laura. You jump in here as well.
I don't really have any questions. I mean, these are all things that pretty much expected to see. I would, you know, based on some of the feedback that I've seen at this point. When is our next citizen survey? Or do we have one scheduled, or?
26.
February.
We put it off before.
Are some of these types of questions asked in that survey? Is that something?
They're not targeted questions for specific type projects, so to say. They're quality of life and those sort of items. Though there's no reason that we couldn't build those sort of
We've done
questions
that
into.
before.
Have they
Well,
further back?
like, one time when we wanted to talk about, I think it was moving, the fireworks from this high school in Silver Spring. I mean, so we've
Oh, really?
targeted
Mhm.
specific things that we were trying to find out more information on, so we could definitely.
Yeah, to move forward, maybe we can incorporate some of that into that.
I'll take a stab. There were two things in this particular exercise that really jumped out at me. The first thing is, I get the sense, just from the other notes that came out of this, as well as the recommendations, which were very good, by the way, kind of similar to what I expected as well, that, one, I think communication is a real downfall. I think that there is a lack of, like I said the word trust, I think, between some of the citizens in the community and their government. And I get that, you know, from some of the stuff that came from earlier that we didn't touch on, as well as some of the things in here, specifically, you know, when I look at the stuff on fiscal stewardship, you know, definitely that comes out. That, you know, they want more communication, they want timely communication, they want, you know, things to be disclosed in a quicker manner so that they can become more engaged in the process. The second thing that I see out of this is, I think that we still don't know what kind of community we want to be. I mean, I wish that we could have a community identity survey, because it seems that what we've been looking for, which is more commercial business and more, you know, user-friendly, you know, forward-facing business. When you look at what they're talking about here with economic development, they're talking about trucker-friendly businesses and warehouses and things like that, which was kind of surprising to me, because I didn't necessarily think that this community was interested in, you know, that. So, that's a little bit of a disconnect for me, a little bit of a surprise for me. And I don't know if any of the other council members picked up on that or not, but I think that we really need to have a dialogue with the citizens as to what we want to be. Because I don't know if some citizens are signing up for, you know, becoming a trucker warehouse community. But that's just me. I mean, but maybe I'd like to hear from some other council members to see what their thoughts are.
I read it, I guess, almost completely differently. It wasn't any surprise that they wanted to invite the economic development that would come with the traffic generated by the intermodal and the turning facility. But what came out of it, and you can tell just by the number of dots that are with here, is they understand the need for it to be focused growth in areas, which talks about some of the other initiatives that we've put in place and some of the other things. It's not to steer what sort of community it's going to be, but understanding that you focus that growth in the right areas and you can still maintain your identity while achieving. I mean, maybe that's overreaching, but that's the way I read it, especially when it was so overwhelming, supportive in those two spots, mentioning distinctly the two areas that they want those developments. So that's how I read into it. And I wasn't surprised by that at all, because people, I mean, it's almost universally understood that the tax burden and the shift between economic and residential is one of our most important things to tackle, and that's the one way to do it, because it's the biggest benefit we have really to achieve some of those goals right now is our access to the intermodal facility and the warehouse and the ancillary development that'll come from that.
Well, I guess I'll just make a couple of comments. I think that, I wasn't necessarily surprised about anything here. I think, I kind of agree with Keith in the perspective that I thought it was, reassuring, kind of the amount of thought put into kind of the business development part and targeted specific, I mean, it's not really, it doesn't say, you know, kind of a free-for-all, you know, it's basically,
Right.
it's very reality-based, I guess, is the best way I can put it, you know, people realize it's here, so let's, you know, control it and leverage it. I think the community center, I've always heard that. I'm kind of surprised that, I'm not surprised that it's at the top, but then I always get this, when it comes down to paying for it and cost is where there's always kind of this, you know, point of contingency, but,
It'd
and
be
then-
interesting to see where it landed if there was a price tag attached. to it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
The other stuff, I mean, I think is great. The one thing that I will say about communication, I tend to agree with Steve a little in the fact that, I received some feedback after the meeting from some people who had left early, kind of with their priorities and what they thought, and, you know, there was a different, the reason they left is because they had a very different perspective on things that were occurring and being said, right? So, there's a very fine balance, I think, that we're trying to accomplish. And I think that's our struggle. I think that, this meeting itself was an attempt to try and, you know, gather some feedback. However, I mean, I can tell you I received an email from somebody who left who said, basically, I elect officials so that they can come to meetings and represent my interests, and if they don't, then I don't re-elect them. So I expect that they're going to represent me, and I shouldn't have to attend, you know, 50,000 meetings to provide my input. So there is those people out there. So it's how do you keep those people engaged and make sure that you're adequately representing their needs, while also balancing that with the people that want that, you know, kind of individualized input, and that's, I think, the struggle. And so I hate to say that there's a communication issue. I think it's a challenge or an opportunity that we have to find a balance to.
And that's somewhat why I was asking about the citizen survey. I mean, you know, we've got 20 people that showed up, we've got 7 or 8 people put a priority, and that's like considered the big priority from those 7 or 8 people. And, you know, with something maybe broader where people wouldn't have to attend a meeting, where you're gonna reach a larger audience to get more feedback. Not that these people are wrong by any means, but I'm just wondering, you know, it's a very small, it's 7 people, you know.
Right.
In a town of 20,000 people, there are obviously people that care about it, but, you know, just to get a broader sense and more of a male-type survey.
It'd be interesting to research what possibilities would be out there. You know, we've got the website redesign that's in process. If survey hosting and things like that and analytics could come into play there, and the opportunity for us to take, you know, maybe it's not, and I don't have the number here, maybe it's not all 55 that are listed here, but the top 20, and ask for an individual, you know, you've got 5 of your own dots now. The citizens have taken the time, one evening, to kind of give us this targeted part. Now we'd like to broaden the scope. So if we can open that door up and there's an opportunity there, I think that ties right into what Todd's doing without, you know, I can't remember what it is, a $6,500 resident survey that we have to do every other year. That's a low-cost way to get some impact there, and it may not be as scientific because theoretically someone from anywhere could log in and do so. I don't know how you can restrict it, but it still allows us to do some targeted things, at least to, you know, your readership, so to speak.
Yeah. Cheryl, we've got some ability to build that in with the website, I wanna say MindMixer, right?
Correct. We do have the ability to be able to do some, surveys of the residents.
And more scientifically performed than, you know, something you might do up online.
Right.
And again, this is all about gathering input.
Absolutely.
Just like this data here may give you just what you're saying, Councilmember Freeman, is maybe it's the next iteration of the survey or the information gathering, it's based on this.
Yes.
They came out of that. Maybe there's a question in that same survey is there anything else we're missing?
Sure.
Or whatever that bucket might be, just give them input, or how would you define, a business development option? Or how do you define economic development as it relates to these two? What's your opinion? As you get that information, obviously it's just more data that would come to you guys to be able to assemble, staff could assemble it down, well, here's what we're seeing. And maybe really a brainstorming of ideas.
Right.
That you could eventually see some resources.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and I think if there would have been anything, at least from my perspective, to that on here that I was like, ooh, I've never heard that, or what have you, I may be a little, more concerned about using kind of limited input, for lack of a better word, but honestly, I mean, I think this trend, even the people that, you know, I received feedback for or talked to that left the meeting, it's very consistent, that the things that they prioritize are pretty much right on here. You know, you
Right.
have some things around Parks and Rec, you have some public safety, I mean, so at least there's a common theme, that I think is the same thing that we kind of see in our citizens, you know, so.
I was a little surprised about commercial development right off the highway especially for warehouses. You know, oftentimes what I'm hearing from people in the community is that, you know, more commercial retail, you know, more, you know, professional services being offered.
Or
Close
activities,
by.
like
Or-
recreational activities.
Yeah.
Entertainment.
And yeah, there is a big push not to funnel intermodal truck traffic through town. So it kind of flies in the face of what we've been dealing with and actually passing ordinances to establish truck routes so that we really have narrowed the scope about truck traffic coming through the city.
But see, I don't see that, because I guess from my perspective, I see it as it goes a little bit to what Steve was talking about with community identity, because
Mhm.
I think if you look at our community, I mean, the heart of Gardner is like here, right? It's not along the highway. I mean, as a matter of fact, I mean, the highway, it's pretty much vacant, so I think people see this, when you talk about commercial development and warehouses along the highway, it's like, it's part of our community, we get the benefit of it, but you drive down the road a little bit and you don't realize it's there. And so you still have our community virtually unscathed from that, you know, I mean, and still keeping this kind of identity. And I think people will realize, I mean, I get questions about it, you know, pretty consistently about, you know, when are we gonna get retail in a grocery store over by the high school? Because they see stuff like that. So I think there's a focus to get those amenities, but it's more in town, and keep the warehouse and all of that stuff on the peripheral where it doesn't impact necessarily my everyday life.
Yeah, my only concern about that, Christine, and I completely get what you're saying, it's far away from downtown now, but in 15 years, is it going to be? And understand also, the interstate is our gateway. That's the gateway to our community. For better or for worse, we've got warehouses all along the interstate. That frames our community, you know, to people who are coming through it. It's an industrial community. And so, from the standpoint of highest and best use, again, you know, that's one of the reasons why we're up here. I mean, it's because we've got to kind of make those tough decisions. You know, you're right, I'm not an economic developer, I'm not a planner, okay? I'm not, you know, I'm not a site inspector, okay? But, you know, what would be the best to accomplish economic development while also contributing to the quality of life of our community? And there's a balance there as well. One quick thing about this survey, I'm thinking in a different direction really quickly here. I'm glad to see that the people in this community see the value of our staff, especially in the area of you know, empowering them to make more decisions and give them more information. whether through training or through augmentation. It's important for us as a community to build our bench within our community and keep that institutional knowledge here, instead of hiring a whole lot of consultants to do that work. And I think you would agree with me on that one, Christina. It's important for us to give our staff the tools to do that. And I think that from that perspective, we've done a poor job of that over the years. You know, not giving the staff the kind of support they need to make those kind of decisions. And so we're forced to do the consulting.
Well, I think, I mean, to me, there's, from a consultant perspective, there's two keys. And I mean, we've had multiple discussions about this, and if you look from our city size and the number of employees that we have per capita compared to other similar cities, we are consistently less, right, as far as staff. And so the question is not only from a skill set perspective, because I agree, I mean, eventually you start building some of the skill set, but the other thing is just from a daily workload and making a decision on, for something like this, and I don't know the answer, I'm just gonna use this as an example. If this is something that you don't consistently do all year long, I mean, in my opinion, the smart thing to do is to spend $15,000 and subsidize it with a contractor versus paying somebody $50,000 to sit here and do that. So, I agree, I mean, I think there's a place for that, for subsidizing, and then there's a place for building bench strength, and right now, I think that we're at a place where it's both. I mean, it's both.
Well, we're talking about IT, and we made that decision as a council a year and a half ago to stop relying on consultants to do our day-to-day IT work and bring it in-house. And, you know, now we've got bench strength there and a source of knowledge that's going to allow us to be able to manage, we're going to be talking about this later on tonight, that critical infrastructure. Well, in a sense, when you look at grant writing and bonding and doing that kind of work, my goodness, you better have some really good, solid people on your staff to do that kind of work and not necessarily rely constantly on outside entities to do that kind of work.
And I think that staff has long tried to, and my guess is they would like to be able to come and say, well, we need, you know, X amount more manpower. And I think that through the years, and really, I mean, going back a number of years, this was something that they would do very sparingly. They would make do with less, and wouldn't ask for much more. Chief Francis, bless his heart and rest in peace and all, I mean, Kenny wouldn't hardly ask for extra police officers or new equipment or new uniforms or, you know, I mean, we were outfitting our police officers with uniforms that we were getting secondhand from other jurisdictions. Now, we saved us a lot of money, and the community's very safe. We're naturally, I mean, recognized across the state about how safe we are, but you know, they were doing it with you know, baling wire and bubble gum in some cases, and it's, you know, that's been a habit that we've had, and we value fiscal stewardship here. So I don't think anybody wants to grow too fast, but at the same time, Christina's absolutely right. You know, we've been doing a good job of doing more with less, and in cases, you know, like this, or you know, the land development code rewrite that we're going to be speaking about this evening, and that's something where, yeah, it'd be great if we had those people in place already, and had enough people so that if they were doing this, it wouldn't be a burden on everybody else, or if we could send somebody to get a little extra schooling so that they could really impact a project like that. That would be fantastic, but it does cost money, and salaries are an ongoing, every year thing, unless you want to consistently, you know, battle turnover problems, which is hard on morale. So, yeah, it's a lot to think about, but yeah, you know, no offense, Ben.
No,
I mean,
I'm
if we don't, If we don't have to have you here,
That's exactly right.
then that's great. We'll see you at audit time and you can give us,
Yeah, you start doing that, then we've got problems. That's part of what we do before.
You can give us not just passing grades, but straight A's, like we've seen in the past, so.
Well, I think we have to make a tough decision as a council, and HR is always a tough decision, it's always a touchy decision when it comes to, you know, investing the community's resources in a wise manner, okay? What I'm saying is that there is definite evidence that in certain areas, we are not only understaffed, we're non-staffed in those areas. We do not have the internal capacity to manage those kind of initiatives. I'd love to be able to have planners and code writers in our department where we could do, you know, every 3 years or every 2 years an evaluation of our codes and make changes as needed, instead of having to go to external entities to do that. We don't have that capacity. So what we need to do is we need to start working now to develop that capacity through this process. I would actually ask for, you know, 1 or 2 staff members to be involved in the community development, the municipal code rewrite, so that they have that tribal knowledge. They keep that institutional knowledge within our institution and try to build a bench of expertise, and then maybe augment that with 1 or 2 strategic hires to pass that information on, so that when it comes 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, and we're looking at this again, it's always changing, that we can do that in-house. Make that move now, so that 3 years from now, we don't have to have these conversations.
Tori, you have anything?
No, I think this is a great start. I also like the idea of having additional surveys to get more input, like on the website, like we were talking about. I think another thing to bring up in that additional survey, and somebody mentioned it before, is costing. Like, if you want this community center, would you be willing to pay more taxes, so forth and so on? Just additional questions to follow up on those.
And actually, you know, I know from talking to some people in other jurisdictions that, you know, community centers are a point of pride in communities, and people take a lot of pride in them, until it gets to budget time, and then when they have to be subsidized, and I'm not sure that I've talked to anybody in any community where the community center actually pays for itself. Now, it improves the quality of life, and it's a point of pride, so isn't it worth subsidizing it? But then again, how much are you subsidizing it, and where is the community's tolerance for that?
Parks and Rec in general doesn't, I mean, Jeff, you could speak on that. I mean, it absolutely, you know, contributes to quality of life, but it will never, you know, pay for itself. It's, you know, the aquatic center, they require maintenance, they require upkeep, you know, Celebration Park. But the community loves them, you know.
I mean, you could even frame the question, you know, and I think it has been in the citizen survey before, like, if this affected your, you know, would you be willing to spend an extra $20 a year, you know, in your taxes, or, you know, how much do you really,
Yeah,
$50?
well,
Or offset sales tax, or, you know,
Right.
I mean, there's options.
And that-
I think that needs to
Want
be
it that
part
much?
of one of the follow-up questions, to get more information, not just, do you really want a community center?
Yeah.
Do you want a community center? How are we gonna fund it? That kind of thing. I think it needs a broader.
Do we extend the half cent sales tax we have in place now to be able to?
And actually, what was asked in the last citizen survey, there was a question asked, would you be willing to pay more in taxes each year to fund projects that would improve the condition of city streets, sidewalks, and traffic flow? Yes to 20%, 22% were yes for $20 a year, 14% for yes for $40 a year, 8% for yes for $80 a year, 12% didn't know, and 44% said nothing. Also asked about if the half-cent sales tax is renewed, where would you prefer to see the money spent? Economic development got 16, street maintenance got 22, don't know got 18, and split between both got 44. Now, that didn't ask, would you like to see the six tax? But it said that this is one of the areas where they would like to see it spent, and in some cases, split evenly between the two, so.
And I'm guessing that, if I was a betting man, and I'm not, if you do this same exercise, obviously headed with staff next time, you do the same exercise with 21 totally separate people, I think you're gonna come up with essentially the same answers, formed a different way. I think the focus will still be there. And I think what they came up with that night is probably dead on. Cost aside, yeah, that'll be a barrier. But regardless of cost, I don't think that's gonna sway their opinion off of what those priorities are. I think the resounding comment was really, here's my priority, now you figure out how to get it done. And that's why there's professional staff that actually do this, and you give them that direction. What kind of impact can parks make to quality of life? Given what you see in front of you, and they go back and they can work through their associations and their processes, to tell you exactly what steps and results they can put in place.
And I'm glad that you brought up the IT stuff tonight, because that was part and parcel of our first priority-based budgeting initiatives, and you know, not only have we gotten, new staff members, but, we've got new initiatives that are we're even gonna be voting on this evening, so it's, budgeting for outcomes in a nutshell. Anybody else have questions for Ben? Or comments to make?
Good work. Thank you.
Yeah, very good work.
We wrote it, the citizens are the one that put it together. I want to thank them for actually showing up through a 2.5-hour session. That's a lot of time out of somebody's life to devote to that kind of commitment. That's a lot of commitment. Sure. But thank you for letting us be part of the process.
No, absolutely. Thanks so much. Well, we've got 15 minutes before city council meeting, so if anyone has something they want to do besides sit up here, feel free, but let's be ready to go at 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. We're going to call Gardner City Council to order, and would invite everyone in attendance to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. We don't have any presentations this evening, so we're going to move straight to public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. If you're interested in making public comments, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and be heard. With no one coming forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a council member present that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion. Second. Motion, Schutz, second, Freeman, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Consent agenda passes. New business item number 1. Consider authorizing the city administrator to negotiate and execute an agreement for IT infrastructure services with Alexander Open Systems for a total amount not to exceed $295,000 to be paid over a 3-year period. And, I would like to recognize, we had some people, from, the metro area, that helped, our IT staff, our administration staff, put together, information regarding tonight's item, and while Greg